classroom. For me, the big major points, and then I'll touch on some of my own personal experiences with this, is number one, taking, I would say, boring content to a lot of our students. This dry content in this thick textbook that they have to memorize and take a test on at the end of the semester, quarter, whatever, taking that content and then relating it to today. And I think history is the most fun with that because you can truly analyze what's going on today. The election, social media, with some of the stuff going on, every day on a daily basis that these kids see on the news or whatever, taking that and then comparing it to our past. Have we grown? Well, how far have we come? How far have we gone backward? It's a nice, fun class to teach about social issues because you can relate it to today and what's going on. I think what a lot of our teachers kind of get caught up on is you get the thick book at the beginning of the year, determining what you're going to teach, and then making sure you hit each section, and then making sure they're ready for the district assessment. But there's so much value in stopping what you're doing and just relating it to what the students are going through at that moment. So a lot of our students, don't get these questions on a daily basis, and they're not asked to question what they see. And definitely in the school system, they're not asked to question the textbooks that they're reading. And this chapter really says, take the textbook that you're looking at and ask them, what voice is missing? So if you're doing an entire unit on Native Americans, and all it talks about is how they were moved, and they moved to a different part of the United States, where are the first-hand accounts from someone who's a Native American? So that the students can really see, yeah, this was a major event that happened in history, and yes, we do need to be studying it, but how come there's nobody telling the part where, kids and moms were separated from each other, where people died because they were forced off the land that they wanted to stay on, where people were shot because they didn't have the same weapons that a white man had? This stuff isn't covered in a lot of our textbooks. And so kids are being cheated out of a true education, I believe. And this chapter is all about questioning those books and questioning the materials that we're given and having our students do the same thing. Have a voice. Be able to say what's missing and what needs to be added and what needs to change and what's going on in our society that's the same thing. So the kids need to question what they are given and not just sit there, follow directions, not talk, not collaborate, and memorize facts out of a huge history book. That is not teaching anybody anything. So there is a lot of value in stopping the class and looking at something that happened that day, or just analyzing the textbook, or not covering the content at all and just talking about social issues going on. There's so much value in that. I think a lot of teachers get caught up on the standards and the book, and this is what I'm supposed to teach, so I'm going to teach it. We need to kind of go away from that. And I know a lot of us are, and some are just completely turning their head to it, a blind eye. So that's the scary part. Everyone's viewpoint in the textbook should be covered. And I think, the biggest thing for me is that a lot of our students are getting this storyline and they're being robbed out of this key component that could really teach them a valuable lesson, right? Students are being shown that here was the civil rights movement and this is what happened and here. Let's talk about how Martin Luther King got arrested. Let's talk about how certain people were killed based on some of the things that they said. Let's get a first-hand account from someone who was white, who was living in the South, and who had a different viewpoint than everybody else in the South. It's getting multiple viewpoints. Not everybody thinks the same, and we should never, ever teach that way. It's invaluable, and it's not valuable to the students, and it doesn't give them anything. Next, it talked about two teachers and how they were able to dissect the texts and take them apart in their classrooms and really teach about social issues, right? If you're covering some kind of unit or something about, injustice, talk about it and relate it to today. And also, it talks about valuing multiple sources of information. So if you're doing some kind of activity in the classroom regarding civil rights, take all the points of view. A white man with a lot of money, a white man with no money, an African-American woman, an African-American male, someone who's Latino. Cover all your bases so that the students can put their heads around all this and see how everyone was involved in history. History is not a bunch of white people formulating this country and turning into what it is today. It's so much different than what these kids are being fed in their textbooks. And so we owe it to them to open up multiple sources of information, to allow them to look at multiple sources of information. We hold the key, We have to give that to them so that they know what to do, and then allow them to use their minds and go from there. So those teachers were kind of giving their firsthand accounts on how they do it in their classroom and how they don't get caught up in these standards, and how, yes, if you are first into teaching or your first, second year, of course you're going to get caught up in the fact that your principal comes in and says, oh, what are you teaching? What are you learning? And if you're in there just talking with your students, a lot of teachers are worried on what that's going to look like, or as a reflection of them as teachers and students, and what's going on in the classroom. But there's so much to be gained, and there's so much to be learned from just conversation, from our students collaborating, from them looking at something that was posted on Facebook or something that's on the media and analyzing it. What's wrong with this message? What's wrong with what's going on in our society? There's so much to be taken from that. And finally, the end of the chapter 5 kind of talks about, again, just getting to know your students. If we know our students better and we incorporate more of their lives and more of their families and more of the stuff that they've been through, they're obviously going to learn more of the information and take more of that content in. When we feel like something's personal to us, we are a million times more likely to hold on to that information and take it with us wherever we go. If it's just another fact to memorize that has nothing to do with my family and where I come from, and nothing of my heritage is being represented in this book, then I don't care. And that's where a lot of our students are at. And just again, to connect this to where I'm at, I work in Rialto Unified. I'm the minority in my school, right? And if I'm teaching a bunch of these textbooks that are Eurocentric and don't focus on any of our students' backgrounds and where they come from and what their families went through, then why are they going to learn the information? How am I going to test them on that information if they don't even care? And I feel like the culture at my school is for the kids to shut up and listen. I truly feel like the classrooms that I've been in and that I've co-taught in, the students don't have a voice. And here we are learning all these chapters about giving students the right to speak and to value their voice. I don't feel like my school's doing it. And I truly felt that if I could be a principal and administrator one day, I would go around to each teacher and say, just be quiet for some days and let the kids talk to one another. Let them collaborate. Give them something to work on and have them just talk to one another. Because I don't feel like that's being done. And our students aren't learning those valuable skills that they can take with them, later in life. And they're not learning to question the establishment, question what's going on around them. They're just learning to follow directions, do what you're told, and move on. There's nothing with that. And our students need to have a voice. And they need to see what's going on in our society. And they need to see the problems that's going on. Because there's a lot of problems. And if we don't teach them about it, we don't teach them how to analyze it and critically look at it, then how's it ever going to get fixed? It starts with our kids. And so, again, it starts with our teachers. How are we facilitating that information? How are we promoting that learning environment? And what are we doing for our kids so that they actually sit there and question what's going on in society and how they can make it better? Thank you.